October 14, 1943. North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Ireland. The sea was a cold, black desert, silent, endless, unforgiving. Inside the steel belly of U-596, diesel fumes clung to the stale air like an invisible fog. Condensation dripped from the curved pressure hull, pattering softly onto the deck plates. Every sound seemed louder in the silence. Boots scuffing, men breathing, the faint ticking of the depth gauge. Captain Lieutenant Hans Weber stood at the periscope well, hands clasped tightly behind his back. He could feel the tension spreading like electricity through his 28 exhausted men. 20 days at sea, fuel running low, U.S. and British patrols everywhere. The old hunters of the Atlantic were now the ones being hunted. Weber glanced toward the chief engineer, Obermaschinenmit Kruger, who whispered, "Batteries at 40%. Air's getting thick." They had no choice. They had to surface. The Atlantic winds hammered against the hull as compressed air forced seawater from the ballast tanks. There was a deep metallic groan, and then the boat began to rise. The men braced themselves. Splash, crack, whoosh. The bow sliced through the surface, water cascading off the conning tower. Salt sprayed into the air. Weber climbed the ladder, boots slipping on the wet metal rungs, and emerged into a world of brutal wind and mist. He breathed deeply cold air burning his lungs. "Surface watch. All stations alert," he shouted. The two lookouts lifted binoculars, scanning the emptiness. The ocean looked clean. Safe. No ships, no aircraft, no radar masts. Only the dark horizon. Weber allowed himself the smallest relief. "Open the hatches. Diesel engines start." Below, engines roared to life, shaking the hull with newfound power. The boat pushed forward, heading toward the convoy lanes like a wolf scenting prey. But then, a distant drone, barely audible at first, a vibration in the air. Weber froze. One of the lookouts whipped his binoculars to the sky. Flugzeug, aircraft, bearing 180. Weber's heart slammed against his ribs. A black silhouette swooped down through the clouds. A US Navy Liberator, wings gleaming with moonlight, searchlights flicking on like the eyes of a predator. How did they find us?" Weber snapped. No radio transmissions, no messages sent. They had been silent for hours, and yet the Americans came straight for them, as if guided by an unseen hand. "Crash dive, jets!" Weber roared. Chaos exploded. Men scrambled down the hatch, boots pounding, metal clanging. The diving klaxon wailed. "HOGH! HOGH!" The submarine tilted downward. Seawater poured over the conning tower as the hatch slammed shut above the last man. Inside, the red emergency lights flickered. Depth 10 meters, 20 meters, 30. Weber listened, waiting for the explosion. It came. KRTHOM. The hull shuddered violently. Dust rained from the seams. The lights flickered out, plunging the crew into blackness. Someone screamed. Another man muttered a prayer. Another explosion. Closer. Shockwaves battered the hull like a titan's fists. Weber grabbed the diving officer's shoulder. "Take us deeper. Schnell." The U-boat groaned under the pressure, rivets creaking, steel fighting the crushing weight of the ocean. "Silent running," Weber hissed. The engines cut. Darkness swallowed sound. The explosions continued, far above now, but still hunting. The aircraft wasn't searching. It knew. The crew whispered in disbelief. "How did they see us so fast? We surfaced for barely a minute. They can see through the ocean now." Weber stared into the void, hands trembling in the dark. This was no luck, no coincidence. The Allies had eyes where no man could see. They had found a way to detect U-boats before they even surfaced. As the bombs faded and the ocean returned to silence, one terrifying truth settled into every German sailor's mind. The hunters were blind. The prey could see. Weber clenched his jaw. "We will survive this patrol," he muttered. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him, because deep inside, he realized something had changed forever. The sea was no longer safe. 40 minutes passed. The U-596 drifted silently at 120 meters depth, suspended in the cold pressure like a wounded animal hiding from the hunters above. The only sounds, the slow hum of electrical systems and the anxious rhythm of 28 hearts beating in the dark. Captain Lieutenant Weber stood over the plotting table, dim red emergency lamps flickering against his stern features. He replayed the terrifying moments in his mind. The Liberator's sudden strike. No warning. No radar detector alarms. Nothing. It made no sense. U-boats had ruled the night for years, surfacing under darkness to charge batteries, coordinate wolf packs, and hunt Allied convoys. The night was their armor, their shield, their freedom. But in 1943, the night turned against them. Weber looked at his first officer, Lieutenant Zursi Emil Hartmann, who stared down at the depth gauge, knuckles white. "They shouldn't have seen us," Weber whispered. Hartmann nodded stiffly. "The Metox radar receivers detected no signals. If the enemy used radar, we would have known. But Metox was an artifact of another time, barely 2 years old, yet already obsolete. The Allies had outpaced German technology without them even knowing." Above, the Atlantic rolled on, indifferent, merciless. Elsewhere, across the ocean, at a U.S. naval air station in Iceland, Lieutenant Jack Grayson leaned over a bank of glowing screens inside an ASV, air-to-surface vessel, radar-equipped B-24 Liberator. The green phosphor blip pulse steady. Target locked. Submarine contact confirmed. He called into his headset. "Approach from starboard. They don't see us coming." The pilot adjusted course, eyes scanning for the faint silhouette ahead. The radar, centimetric wave, secret and unstoppable, could detect the tiny conning tower of a U-boat even in the darkest night and thickest fog. Grayson smiled to himself. Radar wasn't just finding submarines. It was hunting them. Back aboard U-596. The crew whispered the same question again and again. How? Are the British reading our minds now? Do the Americans have new aircraft that see underwater? Maybe God has chosen the wrong side. Months earlier, U-boat Command laughed at Allied radar, dismissing it as primitive, short-range, unreliable. Admirals toasted to German supremacy in the Atlantic War. But then boats started disappearing. U-502 gone without a trace. U-200 lost on its first patrol. 7 U-boats sunk in 1 week. Weber had read the encrypted reports. He felt the dread growing. But now, experiencing the terror firsthand, it chilled him deeper than the North Atlantic water pressing against the hull. He tightened his jaw. It was not luck, Weber said quietly to Hartmann. They came straight for us, as if they saw us before we surfaced. Hartmann swallowed hard. That is impossible. Weber stared ahead, eyes dark with the realization that war was changing faster than any of them understood. No matter how deep they sank, how silent they ran, the unseen eyes of the Allies were waiting above. And U-596 was now marked. Weber exhaled, voice low and steady. Prepare to rise to periscope depth. We cannot hide forever. As the boat angled upward once more, men braced for another assault that might already be aimed at their hearts. Because in the North Atlantic of 1943, death arrived without warning, and no U-boat was safe. The bow of U-596 angled upward, groaning under the strain of ascent. Condensation slid down the steel ribs like beads of sweat. The men felt it too, every meter upward pulling them closer to danger rather than fresh air. At periscope depth, Weber lifted the eyepiece and scanned the sea. Nothing, only wind-broken waves. But he no longer trusted the surface. You can be watching the hunter, he muttered, while the hunter sees you first. He lowered the scope. The truth weighed heavier than pressure at 200 meters. U-boats were no longer the predators. May 1943, the turning point. It began with convoys, those moving walls of steel and cargo that once scattered like frightened sheep at the sight of a U-boat. But now, British escort groups moved with confidence. American destroyers blasted U-boats out of hiding miles offshore. Aircraft circled convoys like hawks, radar scanning relentlessly. Wolfpacks, once the terror of the Atlantic, were being slaughtered. U-230, U-258, U-306, hunted down while trying to coordinate attacks, all because of one silent breakthrough. HF/DF, high-frequency direction finding. Whenever a U-boat sent a radio message, even a few seconds of talking code, the Allies triangulated the signal with frightening precision. A wolfpack gathering to strike was like ringing a dinner bell for the enemy. Radio room, U-596. The radio operator, Matrosenschreiter Kurt Vogel, hovered over his equipment, sweat dripping from his temples. A coded message from BDU, U-boat command in France. Wolfpack Triton assemble east of Greenland. Attack convoy on 207. Weber read the order. His stomach tightened. Wolfpack Triton, 10 boats. A formidable attack 3 months ago. Not anymore. He imagined dozens of radio masts on Allied ships twitching to life. HF/DF sets mapping their position instantly. Do we respond? Vogel asked. Weber hesitated. Failure to obey meant court-martial if they ever returned home. Responding meant gambling the lives of 28 men. Finally, he shook his head. No reply. If BDU asks, tell them the sea stole our words. The young operator stared at him, shocked. A U-boat captain refusing to answer command was unheard of, but silence had become survival. Aboard USS Bogue, Mid-Atlantic, on the escort carrier's command deck, Commander Harold Miller leaned over the plotting table. We've picked up short-burst transmissions. U-boat chatter. They're trying to form up. Operators marked locations with grease pencils. Within seconds, 3 vectors intersected. Miller smiled. We've got them. Send in the Avengers. Minutes later, torpedo bombers rolled down the carrier deck and launched into the freezing air. They weren't searching. They were homing in. Back on U-596, the chief engineer, Kruger, whispered into the tense silence. Sir, we are running from hunters we cannot see. Weber nodded grimly. Worse. He took a slow breath. We are hunted before we even surface. His words rippled through the boat like a cold wind. Once, U-boat sailors toasted to the happy time, when convoys died screaming in the night and German subs returned home as heroes. Now, they whispered prayers into the darkness, hoping the next depth charge wouldn't peel them apart. The wolfpacks still sailed, but their fangs had broken. Their hunting grounds were now traps, and every message might be their last. Weber gripped the periscope handles. This war is turning against us, he thought, and the sea, once their greatest ally, had betrayed them. U-596 slid deeper into the night, diesel engines thundering just below the surface as she crept along at a cautious speed. Weber couldn't shake the memory of that American bomber slicing down through the clouds, like a hawk that had already spotted its prey before ever opening its eyes. The crew tried to recover, but fear hung thick in the recycled air. Below, Kruger moved through the engine room, hand tracing over warm pipes, listening to the vibrations. Mechanical groans, the familiar heartbeat of the boat. He found comfort in it, yet even the engines felt more vulnerable now, as if the sea itself was listening. Weber finally ordered, Prepare to snorkel. A risky choice. The snorkel, a breathing mask that allowed U-boats to run diesels while submerged, was brand new. Command insisted it would restore German dominance, allow subs to stay hidden while staying powered. Weber hoped they were right. Raise the mast, he commanded. The boat shuddered as the thin pipe extended upward toward a world filled with invisible eyes. But the Allies had adapted again. Surface radar, like the old German Metox could detect, was yesterday's threat. Now came Centimetric radar, built on a cavity magnetron so secret its existence was guarded like the Manhattan Project. It detected tiny objects like a snorkel head the size of a suitcase, even in heavy seas. To U-boats, it felt like magic. No warning detectors could sense the wave. No trick could hide from it. Not anymore. Pressure stable, mass deployed, Hartmann reported. Weber nodded. Run the diesels. Silent profile. Fumes vented through the snorkel. Fresh oxygen flooded in, sweet as life. For a moment, hope flickered. Then, a violent clank. A jarring vibration. The boat lurched sharply to starboard. Men shouted and grabbed handholds. What was that? Weber barked. Kruger called from engineering. A wave slammed the snorkel valve shut. Diesel suction nearly collapsed the ventilation. They all knew the danger. One poorly timed wave, and the engines would suck poison into the boat. Choking fumes. Darkness. Panic. A coffin sealed by seawater. The solution that promised safety brought new nightmares. Somewhere above, a British Wellington bomber from Coastal Command traced a lazy circle over the Black Sea. Inside, its operator stared at a quiet, glowing radar screen. A blip crawled across the display. Contact, he murmured. He adjusted dials. Not a ship. Smaller. Almost nothing at all. Yet it moved with purpose. We have a snorkel down there. The pilots turned toward the speck on the water, unseen by any human eye, but utterly exposed. U-596 continued forward, every man hoping the ocean stayed calm, hoping the snorkel stayed hidden, hoping technology they didn't understand wouldn't reveal them again. But the radar operator above smiled. It doesn't matter how small you are, he whispered to the greenlit screen. We can see you breathing. On the U-boat's bridge, Weber felt the unease creeping into his bones. He was a veteran of the sea, a commander who once believed that bravery and skill could outsmart any enemy. Now he realized courage meant nothing against a weapon you couldn't see. Down here, beneath thousands of tons of icy water, fear became the new commander. And in that silence, one thought grew louder than all the machinery. If the Allies could detect a snorkel, they could find anything. U-596 wasn't invisible at all. They were glowing like a beacon in a night sky filled with hunters. The night rumbled. A distant thud, not natural, not thunder. A depth charge, then another. Humph. The hull rattled. Klaxon horn screamed through U-596. Weber slammed a fist against the plotting table. They found us again. Dive, maximum depth. Emergency lights bathed the sub in blood-red flashes as valves opened and seawater rushed in. The floor pitched downward, men sliding and cursing as the bow plunged deeper. Kruger shouted from below, 200 meters and holding. Any more and the hull will buckle. The boat creaked, steel groaning like a beast in pain. The Allied bomber above wasn't guessing. It was tracking them, following every evasive maneuver with terrifying precision. The lights flickered. Another explosion. Closer. KTHOM. A shockwave slammed men off their feet. Glass shattered. Hot steam hissed through ruptured joints in the piping. Someone cried out, "We cannot survive this." Weber gritted his teeth so hard they ached. Silent running. Engines off. Instant darkness. Instant silence. Only the crushing weight of the ocean and the desperate gasps of sailors who feared their next breath might be their last. They were now blind, navigating by instinct and hope alone. Above them, the Wellington bomber continued its lethal dance. Sonobuoys splashed into the water, listening, tiny ears tuned to every metallic scrape, every shifting ballast tank. Technology hunted now, not men. The aircraft dropped a flare, then another depth charge, and waited. But silence is its own sound. Inside U-596, Hartmann wiped blood from his brow, voice trembling. "Captain, this is madness. They pursue us like wolves chasing a scent." "No," Weber whispered, staring into nothing. "Wolves hunt with noses." He tapped a finger against the periscope housing. "They hunt with something much worse. Radar, sonar, HF/DF, tools that turn the ocean into a glass house, turning camouflage into a coffin." The crew whispered hurried prayers. One young sailor clutched a rosary tight enough to draw blood. Another stared blankly, too terrified to even blink. Weber steadied himself. "Low ballast, 5 degrees up, slow ascent. We find a thermal layer, break detection." He spoke not with conviction, but desperation, because he knew the truth. Every U-boat captain knew the truth now. Their world had changed faster than they could react. And the Allies? They weren't done. The boat crept upward through icy water, silent and cautious. A groan tore through the hull, like it was begging to collapse. Another explosion, but distant. Then nothing. No more charges. Only the crushing, suffocating silence. Every man listened, holding breath, waiting for death. Seconds dragged like hours. Finally, Weber whispered, "They lost us." But his voice betrayed doubt. Because out there, above the Black Sea, an unseen enemy was still listening, still searching, still hunting. And U-596 was only one heartbeat away from being found again. Hours crept by. U-596 remained in absolute silence, suspended in a black world with no horizon. Men slumped where they stood, oxygen thinning, sweat gathering into cold beads beads on their skin. Every breath was a ration. Every sound, a betrayal. Weber leaned against the bulkhead, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. But his eyes stayed sharp, focused on nothing, yet searching everything. Sir, Hartmann's voice cracked. What happens when we surface again? Weber didn't answer, because there was no answer. The Allies could strike it well. They knew every trick, every maneuver. The German Navy still clung to old beliefs. Submarines ruled the night. Submarines were ghosts. Submarines were invincible hunters. But the night had new rulers now. Aboard HMS Tay, an escort frigate slicing through the Atlantic gray, a group of British sailors crowded around a radar display. A faint return pulsed once, twice. Likely one of Jerry's tinned fish, the operator muttered. The captain nodded. Notify Coastal Command. Aircraft on station already. Yes, sir. Orders relayed. Coordinates plotted. Weapons armed. The hunt was a routine now. Efficient, systematic, merciless. Back on you. 596. Weber allowed himself a moment, one he hadn't permitted in years. He thought of his wife, Lena, a small apartment in Munich, her hands warm against his cheek the day he left. He promised her the sea would never take him. Now, he doubted that promise. Kruger interrupted gently. Captain, we must surface soon or we will suffocate. Weber nodded, throat tightening. Prepare to rise slowly. No periscope, no radio, no sound. They would surface like a corpse rising from the deep. No lights, no voices, no hope. The bow angled up, dread pooling in every stomach. As they ascended, Hartmann whispered, "Do you think command knows how many we're losing?" Weber's eyes glimmered with bitter truth. They know. He inhaled a shaky breath. They just don't want to believe it. The surface neared. Depth, 10 meters, 5 meters, 1 meter. Ocean water rushed aside as U-590 SIXS conning tower broke through, moonlight bouncing off the steel. The hatch cracked open. Cold air sliced into the boat like a knife. Two lookouts climbed up, binoculars raised, breath steaming in the icy wind. They scanned the horizon. Left, right. The sea was empty. Weber climbed out, boots landing softly on the wet metal. Salt spray hit his face. His heart pounded. For the moment, they were alone. But he knew better. There were eyes watching. Eyes in the sky. Eyes in the dark. Eyes under the sea. Invisible. Unblinking. Inevitable. He whispered into the wind. This is no longer a war of men. He looked up at the cold, star-filled sky. This is a war of machines. And Germany was falling behind. The war for the Atlantic had turned. The U-boat fleet, once feared, was bleeding out in the shadows. Radar, HF/DF, sonar, Leigh lights, the escort carrier fleets, all part of a new doctrine. Find them before they find you. Kill them before they can dive. For the crews trapped inside steel tubes beneath the waves. It felt like the Americans and British had developed something supernatural. Something impossible. Like they had eyes beneath the ocean. And for you, 596. The next attack was only a matter of time. The horizon remained calm. Too calm. Weber stood on the bridge, his oilskin flapping in the wind like a torn flag. A dark ocean below. A darker sky above. But somewhere in that vast emptiness, a predator waited. Diesels ahead. Low revolutions, Weber ordered. The boat crept forward, a shadow moving through shadows. Below, men inhaled fresh air as if it were life itself. Conversations turned to whispers, whispers to silence. Every man felt the same choking tension. The next time the Allies struck, U-596 might not survive. Weber scanned the skies again. Nothing. But he remembered. The British aircraft that attacked earlier never saw them. It detected them. He gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. How can you fight what you cannot see? Aboard a U.S. destroyer, USS Buckley, a sonar operator adjusted his headset, tapping the casing lightly. The faintest metallic pulse echoed across the screen. Possible contact. Bearing 085. The captain didn't hesitate. Bring the Hedgehog launchers online. The new forward-firing anti-submarine weapon, designed to rain explosives directly onto the predicted position of a sub, required no guesswork from depth charges. It was another tool U-boats had no defense against. The American grin widened. Another tin fish for the scrap heap. Back on you, 596. Kruger monitored the fuel gauges. Levels dangerously low. We must change course toward the Bay of Biscay soon, he urged. Home. Base. Safety, if safety still existed. But the Bay of Biscay was a killing zone now, swarmed by Allied patrols day and night. Weber looked toward the southwest, toward France, toward survival. Then he looked north. Endless sea and uncertain fate. Every direction was death. Hartmann approached quietly. Captain, the men trust you. They believe you'll get them home. Weber did not answer, because his heart whispered the opposite. He had once believed the sea favored the brave. Now he knew the sea favored those with radar. A flicker of lightning split the clouds in the far distance. But no thunder followed. Weber's stomach curled with dread. That hadn't been lightning. Aircraft sighted. Dead ahead. The lookout screamed. Searchlights burst to life. Blinding white spears stabbing through the darkness. And from the night came the roar of engines. Swift, merciless, unhesitating. Crash dive. Weber shouted, his voice raw with terror. Men leapt for the hatch, tumbling inside as the submarine tilted downward. Water slammed across the conning tower as the hatch slammed shut. The diving klaxon blared. HOGH. HOGH. Below, chaos erupted. Depth 20 meters. Faster. They're right on top of us. We can't outrun them. Explosions rained from above. Closer. Deadlier. The hull moaned like a dying animal. Weber grabbed a pipe for balance as the sub lurched violently. The unseen hunters were back. And this time, they had no intention of letting U-596 go. Above, The aircraft banked for another run. Its radar locked onto the faint trace of a submarine that could no longer hide. The Allies didn't need to see them. They only needed to know. Weber stared into the trembling darkness. All those years of dominance, all those victories, gone, stolen by machines. There was no ocean deep enough now. No night dark enough. No silence quiet enough. The enemy always knew. Always found them. Always struck first. U-590 SIXS fate was sealed the moment radar lit its ghostly glare upon the seas. Reality detonated. Crumph. A depth charge slammed near the hull. Men thrown from their stations. Tools and charts flying in the chaos. Lights burst into darkness. Screams filled the black void. Water sprayed through a hairline crack. A thin jet knifing across the compartment. Breaches in the forward battery room, someone shouted. The hull is deforming. Pressure rising. U-596 writhed like a wounded serpent, steel ribs groaning under the crushing weight of the Atlantic. Weber pushed himself upright, dizzy, ears ringing. Hartmann, report. Forward compartment taking water, pumps struggling, trim out of control. Another explosion, then another. The Allied aircraft above didn't stop, didn't question, didn't search. It knew. They had the exact position. Every move tracked with radar and sonar like a predator reading its prey's heartbeat. Low tanks. Level her out. Weber commanded, voice raw. Compressed air roared. The bow jerked upward, briefly. Boom. A massive jolt. Darkness. The sub dropped sharply, a deadly plunge. A bulkhead collapsed. 3 men were buried beneath twisted steel. Hartmann's voice cracked. We've lost control planes. She's going down too fast. Kruger yelled back. If we go below 250 meters, the hull will. Screech. Metal screamed under strain. The sound of a coffin being crushed by the sea itself. The boat shuddered violently, then slowed, settling at 230 meters. Barely alive, barely holding. Inside the pitch black, panic took hold. Men sobbed softly. Others prayed louder. One sailor pressed a gun to his temple until another ripped it away. Death felt inevitable. Survival felt like a lie. Weber staggered toward the conning tower hatch, hand trailing the trembling wall. Tie up all loose gear. Patch every leak. Exhaust every solution. He ordered through clenched teeth. Not because he believed they would live, but because a captain must not surrender to fear. Hartmann approached, pale, trembling. Sir, the charges are coming again. Above, a new sound pulsed, a vibration through the hull like an approaching storm. Not depth charges this time. The Hedgehog, a forward-fired barrage of contact fuse bombs. No warning, no escape. Weber closed his eyes. No more running, no more hiding. Their final enemy wasn't a convoy, or a destroyer, or a sailor with a rifle. It was technology. Weapons born from laboratories, guided by engineers, executed by cold calculation. The sonar pings grew louder. Ping, 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 like a heartbeat counting down. In the gloom, bones of the boat creaked as if whispering their last rites. Weber took one long breath, the deepest he could, and spoke softly. Prepare for impact. A moment of stillness. One final heartbeat. The ocean waited.